Good afternoon, everyone. It is the 14th of July, 2024. It's a nice, hot, muggy day, summertime, early in the afternoon in Maryland. Hope you're all doing well. Very modest goals again for today, nothing big. I bought a can of refrigerant when I was at Walmart this morning, trying to save a little money. I'll use the poor man's method of seeing if I can get more refrigerant in the system. The other day I put the gauge on there and it seemed to be low, but I didn't have a can of refrigerant on there yet, so I'm going to put that on and recheck the pressure and see how that affects the reading. And if it looks like it's still low, then I will attempt to put the contents of this can in there. So hopefully that'll help the system to cool better than it is right now. That should be quick and easy. So I'll go for the quick win first. The other thing that I'm going to do some troubleshooting with is the speed control. As I've mentioned a couple times now, the system works fairly well. It does hold speed after it drops 4 miles per hour after you set it. George didn't have a explanation for that. George Borelli I'm referring to in Florida. We didn't really talk too much about that. That's somewhat minor, I think. I think there is an adjusting screw somewhere on that servo maybe that I can play with. I don't remember. I'll have to look at it. But he wrote me this very detailed note, and he's really good about his level of detail that he puts into this. It's very helpful to me. So he gave me some very specific steps to look at to troubleshoot without having to take the cover off the unit. We want to avoid that if at all possible. It turns out my original, when I first took one of these apart months ago, I don't remember when it was, probably in the winter still, or maybe spring, I speculated that it seemed like the whole chamber was designed to hold vacuum, and he confirms, in fact, that is the case. That's why that gasket that's on the cover of the servo unit is a paper gasket. It's meant to seal it against vacuum leakage. So I thought that was interesting. So I'll go through those steps more specifically when I get to that point of testing. Um, we'll talk more about that later. So first I'm going to do the charging of the air conditioning system and see how that goes. Something that I want to double check before I get started here is Jeff Smith reminded me that I need to make sure these service valves on top here are open. They're kind of redundant now because once I installed the adapter fittings for the R134 type refrigerant, they have self-sealing valves on them. So you don't really need to worry about these. They just need to be in the open position at all time as far as I'm concerned, although it doesn't hurt to open them back or turn them counterclockwise all the way back out so it seals off these fittings just to be doubly sure that they're not leaking or anything. So I think I will do that, but in the meantime I hadn't checked to make sure that they're even open. I mean, they should be because I did get a pressure reading, but I'm going to go ahead and turn them in, at least on the low side. The high side I'm not using, so I'm going to leave that one alone since I don't have the the full set of gauges. So this actually may not have been open all the way, which would of course could affect my reading on my gauge. So I'm just turning it in. I don't have to open it fully. I mean, that's plenty right there to let the pressure flow. Yeah, that's interesting. They were both in the closed position, so that reading I took the other day probably wasn't even accurate. In fact, I'm surprised I got a reading at all because it shouldn't have been allowing any pressure to even get to the valve. So that service valve may not even be working right. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure it was open, so I'm getting a good pressure reading. Now I'm going to put my can, oops, I guess you can't see it too well, I got it zoomed in too much. Put my can attached to my hose. Let me zoom out here a little bit. And then we'll start the car up and so forth. All right, I zoomed back in again here because as soon as I connected the hose, all of a sudden my gauge jumped all the way to the max, well above 100 psi, kind of all the way around. I think when I start it and the compressor's running, it'll go back down, but obviously the reading I took the other day was not accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and start it up here and we'll see what that reading does. I'll put it on max setting and all that. Okay. So now the needle's going down. Now we're in the green. Okay, that's interesting. It's sitting right there. It's From what I see on this gauge, I know you can't see it real well, it's actually definitely full, so I don't need to be adding any more to it. Let me just flip this around, show you what I'm talking about. Oh, there we go. So it's gone down a little bit, but it's well within the green, although it is going down. You get the thing going a little faster here. I noticed my fan belt, my drive belt, is loose again. It's flapping around a lot, so I'm going to have to see if I can tighten the adjustment, what's left of it. Looking at the gauge, it's actually it's going down some. Now that the compressor speed is going up, it's definitely going down. So looks like I will be able to add some refrigerant to it after all. I referred to a chart the other day that somebody online had posted about what readings should be based on ambient temperature. And from what I recall, for a temperature in the 80s, it should be like 40 to 45, and it's below that. So it looks like I can sneak a little bit of refrigerant in there. Alright, so I tightened the belt as much as I could, and it's still loose. So I'm going to have to get a new belt. Kind of surprised because that belt was supposed to fit this application, and it's a Gates belt, but it's stretched, and the adjustment is now maxed out. So I'm going to have to replace that. So I'll work on that later. So I used the fast idle cam on the carburetor to speed up the idle some so I can get a better reading here. So with the air conditioning on max inside, it's at about 35. And according to the table that I have for the ambient temperature, which is 90 degrees here right now, I should be between 45 and 55. So I think it's safe to go ahead and attempt to add some refrigerant to it. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to open the valve all the way, twist it all the way in, and let it start flowing. And I'm going to use a rocking motion back and forth to help get the refrigerant in the system. And we'll see how that goes. Alright, so I'm opening the valve now. There it goes. Okay. So she's flowing in the system now. I'm just going to keep my eye on the gauge there. I wouldn't think it would take that much, but I don't know. We'll see how this goes. I just hope it works. I mean, this should work. We'll find out. It says it can take 5 to 10 minutes of doing this before it empties the can. If anything, the pressure's going down even more than it was, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm just going to keep at this. I'll catch you back up here in a minute. That's a few minutes later now. I discovered that I had to close or open it a little bit before I could feel it start to flow. The can is getting very cold now, so now I know it's actually flowing into the system. I guess when I had it all the way turned clockwise, it somehow blocked the valve. So now it's actually flowing into the system. I can feel it. So I'm just trying to get that reading up to 50 to 55. We'll see if it takes it all. Alright, the can feels completely empty to me, and the reading is still only about 33, 34 psi. So obviously I'm going to be able to get more of this refrigerant in the system than just one can, which I'm surprised about. I recall my mechanic seemed to have a little difficulty charging the system, even though he got it working. I remember him saying he's not convinced he actually got everything in there he should have gotten in there. So this tells me one of two things. He didn't actually get all the refrigerant in there that he thought he did, which would explain why it isn't cooling as well as it should, or there's a leak. And of course I don't have any dye. I haven't put any dye in the system yet. I'm leaning to more toward they just didn't get it filled up fully, because this thing is completely empty now. So I'm going to shut things off and go buy another can or two. Alright, I'm in the middle of my drive here, sitting at a red light. I just wanted to report that putting one can in of that refrigerant made a significant difference as far as how the car is cooling. So I went to Advanced Auto Parts. They had a drive belt in stock, so I bought that and 2 more cans of refrigerant. So when I get back home, I'm going to install those. So far so good. Just documenting the different part numbers for the belts. This is the one I just took off. This was a Gates 9476. It ended up stretching too far where it was no longer useful. The replacement is a Daco brand with part number right there. So that's just documenting. So I've got the belt on there, but it's not tight yet. I'm struggling to get the idler pulley with the bolts back in it so I can tighten it up. I'm getting there though. Alright, I just finished dumping 2 more of those little cans of refrigerant in here, and she could have still taken more, at least according to my gauge when it was on the engine running. I had it idling pretty fast, maybe 1500 to 2000 RPM, and it was pretty cold inside the car, so it's definitely making a difference adding refrigerant. What I can't understand is why it's taken so much. I was just listening to see if I could hear anything obvious like a leak, but I guess I really need to put some dye in there and do that step, see if maybe it is leaking. Alright, I've wrapped everything up here with the air conditioning again. The belt is still nice and tight. Hopefully it stays that way. I did check the tightness of all the fittings I could get my wrenches on. The only ones that moved at all were these rotor-lock fittings here that attach directly to the compressor. They did move a little bit. I really don't know if they were loose enough to leak or not. And I know these things make noise even after you shut them off. So I'm hoping there's not a leak there, but we'll take it for a test drive here, see how cool it gets. I also adjusted this little sleeve here where the cruise control actuator works. The gap was wider than 1/16 of an inch. The shop manual specifies where this little washer is right here that it's not supposed to be more than 1/16 of an inch. So maybe that has something to do with that 4 mph drop. I don't know. We're going to give it a shot. I'll take it for a test drive here and see how she does. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I spent more time than I thought I would on the air conditioning system. But what I got done is I got a new belt on there now, much tighter. I don't know why the old one, which was new before, stretched so much, but it became too stretched, so I had to replace it. So I'm glad that Advanced Auto Parts had one in stock that I could get. And the other thing I did here was I added 3 cans of R134A, which seems a lot, and I think pretty sure it can take even more. It has made a difference. It definitely feels colder in the car now, so it was definitely low. And had I bought more cans, I think it would have taken even more. In fact, I know it would have. I'm really surprised about that. On the cruise control or speed control, I did adjust the throttle linkage a little bit, but it didn't make any difference as far as that 3 to 4 mph drop when you engage the unit. It still drops, same as it did before, so that didn't make any difference there. It's starting to threaten rain here, so I'm not going to start these other steps that George gave me because I have to remove the unit and do some specific things to test it. So I'm just going to save that for another day. So I think that was it. See you later.